Yeah, come on and catch a vibe with us. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works, Danny Pommells, the smartest man in the room, Noah Levick, our producer extraordinaire, putting the OD in podcast. It has been Barry enjoying the movies, talking about the newest Mission Impossible film, which is up there on his list of action flicks. I mean, way up there, like Terminator 2 up there. So if you got some thoughts on that, chime in, because Ben Barry is really over the moon about it. But we're in the dog days of summer, Noah. The boys of summer, the Sixers, the Phillies, are on the field as we speak. Down 4-0 here to the Milwaukee Brewers on a getaway day for them. And looks like they might be losing the series. I'm going to keep the hope alive. WNBA season is in full swing. We got some World Cup action on the cusp of happening here, Noah. I want to talk about that a little bit later.
Sure. Yeah, I believe it started last night, and I think the U.S. women have their opening game at 9 p.m. Eastern. So, yeah, if you're a football fan or a soccer fan, it's a good time.
As well as NBA action as relates to the players on the World Cup roster for the Team USA squad. And I want to get into that because I'm curious with Tyrese Maxey's position among those names that are on the list, because it seems like he should be among the Paolo Bancheros and the Anthony Edwards and the Tyrese Halliburtons, but we'll get into that maybe a little bit later on. But with all that's going on, the Sixers drama continues to rise to the top a bit. Daryl Morey doing a bit of damage control on 97.5 The Fanatic. We'll talk about that, as well as what he was doing damage control about Tyrese Maxey's comments. And
sure,
the latest,
I don't think Maxey's
said
anything wild. Yeah.
Joel Embiid's comments. I'm a little distracted. There's a lot of TVs going on here.
Sure.
So Joel Embiid's comments. Tyrese Maxey, what can he do wrong, right? And as well as James Harden's latest about him and his trade preferences and where he'd like to go and what kind of scuttlebutt is actually happening on that front, because it doesn't seem like a lot. But let's start with Joel Embiid's comments. And it's kind of one of those things where you look at some grainy video, a crooked filming of Joel Embiid in an interview with Maverick Carter at a film festival of all places, and he drops the bombshell, as it were, to many Sixers fans that he would like to win a title in Philly or elsewhere if the need arose. I don't know what you made of it. I didn't make a whole lot of it. I just feel like it is such a player dominant league where there's big salaries and short contracts and a lot of movement and players holding a lot of the cards in these instances, as we can see with this Damian Lillard thing. That's the latest thing playing out. Why would anyone leap onto those couple of words about anywhere else? He just wants to win a title, and if it's not in Philly, then he'll do what he has to do to win it elsewhere. I didn't take much offense to that. I just felt like he was just speaking his mind. I mean, we want athletes to say how they feel and to be honest and upfront. And then when they are, it's, oh, wait, what are you talking about? Why would you dare say that type of thing? And I think Daryl Morey coming on 97.5 The Fanatic, just trying to massage everything and calm it down. But did you feel the same way? Did you feel like it wasn't a big deal about Joel's comments, or did you draw anything else from it?
I'd say somewhere between not a big deal and, oh my gosh, this requires a massive freak out. I think much, much closer to not a big deal. Okay. But look, he has been pretty consistent in his career in stressing that he wants to be a Sixer his whole life. He, raised his son here. He feels roots in this city. And, that specific comment obviously was not consistent with that tone. That said, I think it would be a giant stretch to perceive this as anything like, severe discontent on Joel Embiid's end. Him and Daryl Morey clearly have a close relationship. And I think, it would be a real shocker if Joel Embiid were to drastically, change course and to reveal that with, 3 words slid in there in
the middle of the summer to Maverick Carter, right?
Yeah. I mean, that said, Joel Embiid is a smart guy who's really savvy about what he says. And I think somewhat ironically, in this lengthy interview, touched on navigating the NBA media landscape and at times not being thrilled that people blow up, a few words that he might say in a post-game press conference, or might in his mind misconstrue what he says. And then he makes this comment that I think many Sixers fans found to be, offensive, or definitely not something they wanted to hear on a Monday morning, which was actually a few days after he said it. So yeah, look, I mean, in my opinion, Joel Embiid is not like asking for a trade or anything remotely close to that. I think he is going to be 30 years old next season, though, and like the prospect of him ending his career in Philadelphia probably, is much more likely if the Sixers finally get over this hump in the very near future and there's finally some stability. He even talked in this interview about not feeling like there's been a lot of cohesiveness and how the roster is, revolving doors, and there's a lot of turmoil with the Sixers. I think that all that's on point. I also think, no one who roots for the Sixers wants to hear any of that, or is very sympathetic to Joel Embiid these days. And then, of course, he took to Twitter afterwards, as he still likes to do. And
it's like hard to even keep up with what exactly he's.
Yeah, he said, check my middle name on Twitter, which is still, Joel Embiid, whatever. I mean, I think many fans, again, are not inclined to be cracking up at that and, oh, Joel got us. Like, I don't think anyone is too
even the
thrilled with the sense of humor.
Trolling definition is like an evolving thing. Like it could mean one thing at one time or something else another time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I guess there's something to the notion of those few words he said in this, semi-private forum were not intended to indicate, profound discontent with the Sixers situation. I think that's legit, and there's probably some truth to the humor, in that regard. But I think probably for many people who care about the Sixers, they're over a lot of this, what do these words mean? What is trolling? What is not trolling? They just want to see Embiid win in the playoffs, do it with the Sixers uniform, and he's going to be 30 years old next season. So not that time is, rapidly running out, but clearly it's pretty important that he gets the job done soon as far as leading the Sixers deep in the playoffs. And he does acknowledge there, that that's the goal for him, and it's been very difficult, and still chasing that goal.
Our producer, Ben Barry, chiming in, Noah, saying trolling is the new I got hacked, which is also still pretty recent in the lexicon a bit. But all he had to say was, I want to win a championship. No one would ever wonder if he meant something else. And I feel you, Ben. I just don't want athletes to feel like they need to be so guarded at all times. I mean, we get some of that when you hear Jalen Hurts talk a little, coach speak and kind of straight up and down with some of his answers, although he's impassioned and speaking from the heart in a lot of instances. But even this, Noah, as someone who works, with the written word so often, and is left in situations where you have to interpret a lot of these things, like what journalism has really changed over these last several years, where, for instance, like you had a Saquon Barkley situation in the New York Giants. I hate to jump sports like that, but just stay with me. He has a 4 p.m. deadline to negotiate a new contract. At 3:57, he tweets out, "It is what it is." We learned that, they are at a stalemate and that they're not going to work anything out. But your job as a journalist is to figure out that the is what it is applies to him and the Giants not coming to a contract, and then include that in a story when in essence it's just like 5 or 6 words, and he doesn't specifically speak directly to this thing, but such and such tweeted a thumbs up. So the thumbs up is connected to, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the role of journalists and journalism, and a lot of ways and a lot of times we have to like break down these nuances of social interaction or social media that can be interpreted more than one way, or, people take it different ways. So it's frustrating sometimes, but it's kind of just, what it is now,
Yeah, I mean, I think back in the day there was generally less need for parsing this and that. One, because, you didn't have the various social media that athletes could put, cryptic things out on, but also just, the norm, I think, was a lot more openness, and every media availability didn't feel like this big event where
Right.
everyone was filming and had a cell phone out, and
It reached so many corners of the world all at once.
And athletes, I think, often, with some justification, feel that they're on the verge of fielding a gotcha question or something. And I think, you hear stories about Charles Barkley or Julius Erving back in the day. Every practice they were, holding court with reporters, and some of it's on the record, some of it's off the record, and they're not speaking from a place of wariness that a few words are going to be blown into a headline. And obviously, in my position, I don't want to be feeding into that fear and unjustifiably blowing up a few words into a headline. But sure, a few words that Joel Embiid tweets very well could be important and could actually be news. So you try to juggle all that as well as you can. And it was just very ironic, I thought, that Embiid was speaking at this forum where, he's partnered with Maverick Carter's Spring Hill company, and Embiid has this new media company called Miniature Giant, and he's interested in storytelling and, controlling messaging in a sense, and the way people perceive athletes. And obviously that's a lot of what Uninterrupted does. So I think, from my position, just try to be cognizant of it all, try to be responsible, and at the same time, like, don't, be oblivious to the realities that this is a much different world than when, Charles Barkley was shooting the crap with, a few guys in the Sixers locker room and not filtering himself at all. That's just not the reality these days. And we do our best to, interpret what's out there and zero in on what is actually legit and what's not. And when Joel Embiid says a few words that indicate he's not 100% set perhaps on remaining a Sixer, then that's going to be notable. It doesn't mean we need to blow it up into the biggest deal in the world, but he's the MVP of the league, and I think it's fair enough to spend a little bit of time talking about it.
How fair is it? How much legs should something like this have? Is it malpractice to carry this all the way into training camp months from now, when we probably will see him face to face, or is this something in July that should kind of stay in July instead of being carried all months from now?
Unless there's more that's consistent with this, I wouldn't be inclined to be asking him about this specific quote at training camp. But
I think someone's going to.
I think I wouldn't be shocked if someone would, and I would understand, especially from the perspective of like giving him a chance to clarify or something. I think that's always legit, and that's always a valid field of questioning. But from my perspective, I don't envision having much curiosity about this specific moment. But obviously there are other storylines that are still up in the air with the Sixers and how their offseason is going to play out, and whether Embiid's co-star last year is going to be at training camp. So I think all of that is relevant and part of the larger picture.
Do you think Daryl Morey felt forced into action to go on 97.5 The Fanatic to kind of do a little damage control and touch on other topics while he was there because of what Embiid said and the reaction to it, or do you think that was something that was already planned?
I would be surprised if the Embiid comment, like in isolation, was, the sole impetus of him, speaking on the record. I mean, we heard Morey say in that interview that he had an extended conversation with Joel, and that Joel talked with Nick Nurse, and in my opinion, those behind closed doors conversations are way more important than whatever Daryl Morey says about the Embiid, situation on the record. I think, that would be, my hunch on why Morey was inclined to talk. I think definitely the Harden stuff is, much more pressing,
Mhm.
for the time being.
And let's talk about the hard stuff because it looks like the LA Clippers are the team he wants, but not necessarily a trade that is going to happen here in the immediate future, at least based on everything that's out in the open or has been reported. And yeah, he still wants to be out of here. He still wants to be elsewhere. He did opted in and then told everybody he wants to be shipped somewhere else. And the LA Clippers are the place he wants to go, but so do, you know, 98% of the rest of the players in the NBA want to go to LA and play in that town and be in the sunshine and the Hollywood excitement and all of that. To be on national TV, so many nights a year. So whether that happens or not, and sure, there is an avenue for the Sixers to, recoup some assets and, get some depth and some versatility if that was to happen. But Daryl Morey on 97.5 The Fanatic said that, listen, we're going to make a trade that's going to keep us in championship contention. And that's really where things stand. And we saw him hold his water, so to speak, in the Ben Simmons situation and kind of stare him down and play chicken a bit. So this is less impactful than the Simmons situation because there's not as much contract and dollars involved in the future. And there's also the idea that Harden might be more of a professional. There's no injury connected to it either. And he'll be more of a professional and maybe show up and play. And, in training camp, the report that was made yesterday, I think it was from Yahoo, but the report that was made was that he would likely, there is that percentage that he would show up at training camp and just play out the contract until a trade develops. But where are you at with it, Noah? Do you feel like, the Morey stance and the camp of the Sixers brass that, listen, we're just going to stay here and wait till something that develops that we like and then make a decision when that happens? Or do you feel like, Harden is once again in this situation of possibly distracting and dragging a team down away from competing and being ready to compete for a title?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he's indeed in that position, but I do think, it's not especially palatable. But yeah, what Daryl Morey said is entirely valid. I don't think anyone would have liked to hear him say, yeah, this is probably going to get done in the next 2 weeks. And the main reason for that is I just want to get the unhappy fans off my back and get this thing over with. No one would have liked that perspective either. It's just a very unpleasant situation that the Sixers find themselves in. And yeah, I mean, I think we've heard, Yahoo Sports' Jake Fisher said, for now the Clippers aren't even inclined to part with Terrence Mann, who, is a role player, a guy, as I've said, I personally like, but I think that gives you a sense of why Morey has not yet, shipped James Harden off to Los Angeles if the Clippers aren't even willing to part with that sort of player in a deal. Morey, I think, did lay out, there's the one scenario of we remain in that contention tier. And then there's the second one where we get enough back in return that in the shortish term, we're able to flip those assets for, a high caliber player. Mm-hmm. So I think that at least indicates to you this is not Simmons-ish, where he is truly not going to budge, unless the Sixers are getting an all-star talent in return. I think there's some realism on that front. But I think also the realistic situation right now is that it sure sounds like the Sixers trading James Harden to the Clippers would not make the Sixers a better team. Yeah, and in the sense of, will he show up to camp and what would happen in that instance? It's obviously really fascinating, and there are many ways that could play out. I mean, with Ben Simmons, didn't show up for a while, then practiced for a couple of days, and it seemed like everything might proceed with moderate degree of normalcy, and then boom, he's kicked out of a practice, he's suspended for conduct detrimental to the team, and the thing lingers for months on end. So I think James Harden showing up does not at all guarantee that he is putting on a Sixers uniform, that he is.
Do you really think things might deteriorate that far, though? Like
they've already deteriorated pretty far. So
really, from last season.
Well, I mean, I think also as Joel Embiid articulated, like there's the personal side of this and there's the business side of this. James Harden, by all accounts, is really determined to go to the Clippers, and the way you can theoretically make the Sixers, act with the most haste is by putting them in an extraordinarily uncomfortable position. And I think James Harden showing up and being like a fine basketball player isn't uncomfortable for the Sixers. That's actually exactly what they want. So, yeah, I'm not too sure what his perspective is going to be months down the line. For now,
if it turns into that, man, that would be almost as unpalatable as the Simmons situation.
Both are pretty bad. Yeah,
I didn't think that we were on par with that type of situation, but the way you lay it out and the way my mind is moving, I don't see much difference if between those two situations.
Right. I mean, it's what I think you said the word impactful, that Simmons was more impactful. I think that's that's reasonable because Simmons had all those years left on the contract, whereas James Harden, it's the one season. But obviously, Joel Embiid is a couple years older, and there should be field a team that really has a chance to win the NBA title. That said, as Morey emphasized in this interview, the number one goal has to be putting the best team on the court in the NBA playoffs, not necessarily having the best team in July, the best team on day one of training camp, or even the best team in January. So
that's a tough cat and mouse game to play, man.
Yeah, and it's a tough sell, I think, to this fan base that has been very patient in many ways. But yeah, like for me, the bottom line is it is supremely sound thinking not to just go ahead and trade James Harden where he wants to go when the team he wants to go to isn't offering much that's attractive at the moment. So I think, all indications are we're going to keep mulling this over for a while. I think it was at least helpful to hear Daryl Morey lay out a stance on the record, even if it wasn't especially surprising. But I think the tone he took certainly confirmed that he's remaining pretty stubborn with how he sees this. He did say, sure, like if James wants to, come back, we'd be glad to have him, but not sounding like that is probable, as we sit here in late July.
What do you think? Is there any collateral damage that Morey might feel from, targeting Harden for the Simmons trade, bringing him over, the whole meeting him on the tarmac and the pictures and making it seem like not him necessarily making it seem like, but it seemed like this was a relationship that was, a big reconnection, and Harden's words of, wanting to Daryl's his guy and, him liking Doc Rivers and stuff like that. Is there collateral damage that falls back on Morey because, we thought you had this under control, but it seems like you don't?
Yeah, I think that's to some degree a valid criticism. I thought it was interesting and a little surprising to me that Morey was candid enough to acknowledge my understanding of why James Harden wants a trade is he didn't get the contract he wanted. So I think not that there was much doubts about that, but we got confirmation yesterday that the reason
the money wasn't right.
The reason there's animosity now is James Harden was expecting things to play out better for himself than they did.
He did bend over backwards, so to speak, in order to give the Sixers flexibility to bring in some of these other players, which they ended up getting tagged for in penalties. But nonetheless, he did take less money in order to facilitate some of that.
Indeed. Yeah, I think that's absolutely notable background here. I think James Harden's camp most definitely still considers that a quote unquote pay cut. Obviously, there are a number of ways that you could look at that in terms of what could James Harden actually have made? How much of a pay cut was that actually? What was his like open market value, whatever. But sure. No, I mean, James Harden did not need to do that. And his decision there enabled the Sixers to get some useful role players. So I think heading into this offseason, especially given the good history with him and Morey, you figured the sides might not begin on the same page, but they end there. But yeah, they most definitely are not aligned at all right now. And Daryl Morey, I think, understands that it's, again, pretty high stakes. And again, that is a legitimate reason not to rush into a bad trade. As you know, it's not one anyone wants to hear, but yeah, you don't make a trade in late July just because everyone doesn't love where things are at for the time being.
I personally am bullish on Daryl Morey. Some fans feel like he needs to do more, and I can understand that. I just still believe that the savviness he has shown in the Al Horford deal and the Josh Richardson trade, and I really wish he was here for Jimmy Butler. I'm sure that would have turned out differently, but I just feel like what he's shown and turning over the roster, and the Anthony Melton, another great example, he's shown the propensity to find value and to negotiate and figure things out in ways that maybe we didn't expect. So, and the Simmons trade too. I mean, in essence, you had a guy who was even more disgruntled than how you just described James Harden as, and seemed to be damaged goods, but you still managed to negotiate, play chicken, hold your water, all those little, descriptive words and adjectives in order to figure out how it worked best for the team. So I feel like he has his finger on the pulse and is able to figure out, negotiate in good faith, get things done, play that businessman role when it's not personal, but we still need to be, as upfront, serious, and on point with this as we possibly can. So I'm saying all that to say I still like Daryl Morey, but
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty good track record, I think, overall.
Think about the executives we had.
Sure. No, he no doubt he's an upgrade over.
Who had plenty of chances and opportunities, and had the keys to the whole organization and didn't figure it out. So I don't know why people would be condemning Daryl Morey as much.
Yeah, no, big upgrade over Colangelo and over Elton Brand and that collaborative regime. And I think the draft nights especially have been strong. I mean, that first draft night was outstanding with multiple, good trades. Tyrese Maxey, Paul Reed, Isaiah Joe. I mean, that first draft night.
You got blinders on if you're down on Daryl Morey. I think you got blinders on, considering all the other stuff that we put up with in the past.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly has made some impactful moves that weren't good. The Jalen McDaniels, Matisse Thybulle trade, clearly a thumbs down. The George Hill trade at the deadline didn't pan out for the Sixers.
Dwayne Dedmon.
Yeah, and various backup center options outside of Paul Reed have not been successful whatsoever. And now he joked about it, but he's in this position where he's decided to focus a little more on backup center. And I think not hard to argue.
5.
That's a bit excessive.
5 centers on the roster.
Depends on how you characterize it, but you've got quite a few guys who have played center.
Are we making Petrusev a stretch 4? Is that what we're going to?
It's what he played last season. Okay. I mean, I think, as I said, I'm not so convinced he's going to be capable of guarding agile NBA 4s or being an NBA quality player. But yeah, that's an end of roster move. I'm not going to, rip the Sixers for that decision. But I think certainly now it's still a little head scratching that they have devoted this number of roster spots to centers, Montrezl Harrell among those guys. So Morey, is asking for patience and indicating that he has a long view in mind, but I totally get caring about backup center. As I said, I agreed with the decision to bring back Paul Reed. I think it's useful that PJ Tucker is capable at that position. I think Mo Bamba was a reasonable add on a vet minimum. But yeah, Montrezl Harrell, Petrusev, to me, I'm struggling a little bit with the notion that those are good uses of roster spots on this team. But we shall see, as Morey said, what the team looks like heading into the playoffs. And I think it wouldn't be surprising at all if it looks quite different. And with Petrusev also, I'm not sure there was like a ton of awareness of this, but what I was told is like the first year of that contract is 50% guaranteed, and it's a 2-year deal. So I think reading between those lines, it's not a sure thing, right, that he is playing regular season games next year for the Sixers. Certainly possible, but
there's an escape route.
It's not a fully guaranteed deal. It's 50% for year one. So we will see if he ultimately, ends up being in this mix. But right now, it is a little hard to envision this many big men behind Joel Embiid. And it does feel a little bit excessive from where I'm sitting, even though I totally understood the point Daryl Morey was trying to make that, well, we have guys here who can play the four and have some versatility. I understand it, but it still feels like a bit much to me.
Let's pay some bills here. Ben Barry giving us the Greg Monroe treatment. He's more of a Greg Monroe guy. Let's get into Wilmington University. They are one of our greatest sponsors, and Wilmington University and students are in the game, upskill in fields like cybersecurity, fintech, healthcare, and education. In person or online, get in the game at Wilmington University. Find us at wilmu.edu. It is time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your games at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Interestingly enough, the Sixers draft picks, and we've talked about, Tyrese Maxey and Matisse Thybulle a bit, but this past draft, they didn't get anything at all except their undrafted signings. But apparently Daryl Morey had his eyes on the sliding Cam Whitmore, the Summer League MVP, and was trying to figure out a way to get into the first round to pick him up. Wow, would he look incredible on this roster. But once again, the Sixers aren't able to bring together a guy in their own backyard who seems like a sure thing. And did you think he was really serious about that? Did they have a way to actually make that happen, to pull it off?
It sounded really serious and really perplexing to me that he would talk about that. Mm-hmm. I guess it doesn't hurt from like a PR standpoint
to link yourself
float
to him.
The idea of, hey, like we were really trying, right. Like he's in our backyard and I was watching his games and I know he's really good. But man, that was a strange one. In terms of whether it was viable, I mean, evidently no. And yeah, I struggle to think of what package the Sixers could have put together that would have landed them such a player. But yeah, Cam Whitmore, good for him with the Summer League MVP. And I think he is clearly motivated to make a lot of teams look foolish for allowing him to slide to number 20, still just a teenager, and obviously has some great potential. And yeah, Daryl Morey let everyone know that he is aware Cam Whitmore was very talented, and he even dropped a little Tyrese Maxey comparison in there. The notion that he fell somewhat surprisingly as far as he did in the first round of the draft. So yeah, I don't think my guess would be it was ever at all an attainable proposition for the Sixers, but it was by far the most bizarre part of that interview to me that he even broached that subject, albeit did not use the name Cam Whitmore, but I don't think you needed to do much deciphering back to our early conversation. Like he was pretty upfront. This was a guy in our backyard who fell far in the draft. I think that is Cam Whitmore from Villanova. And he is not a Sixer. He's a Houston Rocket.
And that Houston core, man, Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore.
Yeah, Jabari Smith, he was better than I expected in Summer League.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And showing that, hey, I might have played last year, but I still need to get better. And I'm going to show up here and try to make my game improve. But right up there with the Oklahoma City Thunder and these other teams with these incredible young cores. And interesting to see how that develops. But speaking of young players, Tyrese Maxey, I teased this at the start of the podcast, but I just wanted to throw this World Cup roster out there to you, Noah, to see if maybe they're overlooking what Tyrese Maxey is and what he brings to the team. So a couple players I've identified who are on the roster, came on late, but still got the Team USA World Cup invite and are on the final roster. But you got Austin Reeves, a guy who I'm sure wasn't an apple of their eye early in the process, but kind of came on late. Walker Kessler, maybe so. Cam Johnson, And of course, Paolo Banchero, yeah, he was the rookie of the year, but still, had to come on late in order to be in the mix with these other players like Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton, Mikal Bridges, who were more established entities. So we got Paris in 2024. Here we are at the World Cup in 2023. Should Tyrese Maxey be in the mix with these guys, or are they missing out on what he brings to the table?
Yeah, obviously, I'm not personally privy to all the behind the scenes convos of who's offered what, who might turn down X or Y. But yeah, to me, Tyrese Maxey would be an entirely worthy inclusion on that roster. And my assumption would be if he rises the way the Sixers hope and has an all-star or all-star-ish season, then he would be in contention for Paris. I mean, I think that's not an outlandish thing to say. I think, Drew Holiday, a guy Maxey has looked up to, has obviously been a strong player on the international stage. And I don't really mind the idea of Maxey as some sort of depth behind Holiday in the next Olympic Games. Maybe that'll be premature. Maybe Maxey won't continue, soaring up the level of his game, but I don't think it's a ridiculous thing to float out there. I don't also think it's some horrible snub right now. And again, don't know the details of exactly how all this comes together, but
maybe he had a scheduling conflict. Maybe
totally possible.
Yeah,
I know he runs a camp in his hometown. Maybe he decided that would take precedence or whatever. Really don't know, but you would certainly think for the Olympics, for the large majority of players, if they're asked, the answer will be yes. I assume he's among those guys, and I think if he has a good season, then he should be in that conversation. Sure.
And maybe,
and we're waiting on Joel Embiid because he's eligible for, Team USA. He's eligible for France. So still TBD.
Paolo Banchero getting a little backlash from his choice of joining Team USA.
Okay.
Yeah. But we'll see how it all plays out here as it will be exciting. I love when the stakes are high, man.
Yeah. It would have been neat to see Nick Nurse coaching on the international stage now, obviously with
Team Canada. Right?
Yeah, but probably best for the Sixers that he gets to focus on the many things he has to worry about now as the Sixers head coach. I think, if he was preoccupied with that, that probably wouldn't be ideal for the Sixers.
No, do we need to touch on the website before we get out of here? Anything you're working on that you want to tell the people about?
I guess the one thing to note would be the Sixers have added a couple more assistant coaches.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah,
including Brian Gates, who previously had Nick Nurse as one of his assistants in the USBL way back in the day. And it sounds like he's going to be high up on the staff. I don't know exactly what the pecking order will be, but Adrian Wojnarowski reported that, Gates had committed to the Dallas Mavericks, and the Mavericks said, you're fine to go to Philly, in part because he's going to be pretty high up there.
Okay.
So I think that's an interesting add. Nick Nurse has a lot of respect for guys who have coached as a head coach in the NBA, D-League and the minor leagues. This is a 2-time D-League Coach of the Year. And then for the past 15-ish years, he's been a pretty well-regarded NBA assistant. So connections from Nick Nurse's past there. Then Matt Brazy as well, who is the grandson of Lute Olson, the late Hall of Fame Arizona coach. And he walked on for his grandpa in college. And he coached a team for 1 year in Italy and now is joining the Sixers. And he's also, yet again, a guy with connections to Nurse from the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, and was a Rockets assistant under Mike D'Antoni, and has those Daryl Morey ties. Just details on what those guys bring to the table and their histories on the website. I think that's the item of note in that regard.
He is the smartest man in the room for a reason. Noah Levick, we appreciate your hard work and dedication to the beat. For Ben Berry, our producer extraordinaire, I'm Danny Pommells. This has been the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. We'll see you next time.